Usual for me because this conference is actually running early, so I was going to use the 5 minutes to prepare. So this is going to be spontaneous, and I'm true to myself as being very last minute. But this makes it more interesting because you never know whether I will crash and burn and not know what to say. So anyway, I've been asked to talk about scaling a business. I'll talk about lastminute.com, which is ancient history, so most of you are too young to remember 1998 when it started. And then I'll talk about some of the more recent businesses that I hope you have heard of, that I'm also involved with. So the journey of lastminute.com, and I think what I'm going to try and draw out is lessons and how we were able to scale, despite at sometimes feeling like we wouldn't. And the one thing is, if you ever met an arrogant entrepreneur, they really don't deserve to be, because we all go through a very thin line between success and failure. And there were many times when our company could have gone from hero to zero, and I think it's a very humbling experience. But as you heard earlier, we did take the company public and exited for over $1 billion in 2005, when $1 billion was real money. Not like now, obviously, when you've got to have 3 billion or something. But the journey, I'll quickly take you through the beginning of that journey. And then obviously, like many of you, what was it about? It was first the idea. And the best thing I did with the idea was I didn't do anything with it. I had the idea in 1996. It was too early. I recognized that. I waited. I got some experience. The next critical part was what that experience was in, and that was in learning about the internet very early on, getting some knowledge, and making myself a bit credible. Because at the time when I had the idea, I was 27. That's quite old now, but at the time that would have been quite young and inexperienced. And I was a strategy consultant, and I'd only ever managed 3 people. And I didn't really understand the internet except trying to tell other people about it. So I hadn't actually done any work experience. So I worked in the internet. And I worked for a company at one stage called QXL that ended up having its own, actually £1 billion exit. That was an online auction company. And I learned some lessons there. I mainly learned that the company was growing like crazy. This was 1997. I learned that I didn't want to be a sole founder. The founder of that did it on its own, which is admirable, but incredibly stressful. It's stressful enough starting your own company, so doing it with someone else is helpful. So what I then did is I ended up leaving that company, and in 1997 worked on the business plan. I found Martha Lane Fox and asked her to help me work on the business plan. Together we wrote the business plan in 4 weeks. And I think one of the important things is we weren't put off by people who knew too much. So there were some people we went to in the early days who said, look, I've run a travel shop and therefore in Gatwick, and therefore last minute won't work. And they were very smart people, but their advice was wrong because they couldn't see, they were too close to it. And so I think a lot of innovation comes when you don't actually know too much. You still know to listen to people outside you, but you don't you're not the absolute expert in your subject, because then innovation becomes quite hard, actually. So we then wrote this business plan in 4 weeks. We raised money in 6 weeks, and what we did was, one, we were okay at writing a business plan because we'd learned how to do it. We had some credibility because I'd been working in the internet for 10 months, which at the time was like 7 years today, or maybe 10 years today, because there's inflation. I'm not keeping up with inflation. And so with that experience, we then sent this plan out. And then the first thing about our first investors, and some of them I've actually met by mistake. You don't have the privilege of this, but I found one of the investors, because director inquiry still existed, and you had to dial up by phone, and they gave me the wrong phone number. So that's where luck plays quite a part. They gave me the phone number of a wrong guy, and I called up some different guy, New Media Investors instead of New Media People. And he ended up being the first guy to say yes to our business. So unfortunately, Google doesn't tend to make those mistakes as much. But what happened then is it was in the pitches when Martha and I were just so enthusiastic and so passionate and excited that the investors saw that passion was infectious. And I think that's important. What an investor is looking for is you've got to be a salesman. When you're going into those early meetings, they know that you're going to have to sell to get early people on board. You're going to have to sell to your clients, employees, staff, everyone. So being able to convince them that we would pass the 11th employee test. In other words, not just the 5th employee that we hired would be great, but the employees that they would hire would be great. And a good example of our 4th employee, to show that we were doing this and complementing ourselves, our 4th employee was a guy called Flint, who partnered with a Finnish guy called Sami to found a business called Trulia that he later sold for $3.5 billion. That's what I mean about 3 being the new 1. So that was the sort of talent we were able to attract, and it was very important that we were able to convince people that we had this exciting talent pool. Then there's the point, are you going after a big enough market? And we felt we were, and the investors did, because we weren't just last minute travel, we were last minute everything. Going away, going out, staying in. So then quickly, we raised some money, and I think one of the things we were able to do is, because the business was distinctive enough, we were able to get a large amount of attention. We courted controversy, and I think that's something that's important, is if you want people to talk about your business. So we did play the PR game very well. We were lucky to be going into a cycle in 99, 2000 of when everyone was looking for what are the hot new companies to talk about. And because we were innovative and based in London, we were able to do that. But then the most important thing was this constant search for credibility. So credibility we got by getting amazing people on our board. When we were 10 people, we had the former chairman of KLM Airlines. We had investors like Deutsche Telekom and France Telecom very early on. So this made these big suppliers take us very seriously. Then the salesmanship came in. And it's like, how, when you are a tiny company with 10 people and almost no revenue, do you get better deals from multinational airlines like British Airways than your competitor who's been in existence for 20 years? And that, if you'd asked me about that before, sanguinely, before I'd actually started the business, I would have said, that can't work. Surely that's impossible. But we managed to do it by working with these suppliers in an innovative, not innovative way, actually, in the traditional way of which they used to work. So we went to the big airlines and said, just fax us, and we will manually data entry the special rates. And by the way, we need better rates because we're working with you in a different way. There's no cannibalization. We'll even do unbranded rates, which, believe it or not, this was sort of pre-Priceline in Europe. No one was doing that. So there were different models. So there was a lot of business model innovation. But in the scheme of it, for these big suppliers, we also had to make them very simple to work with us because we knew that they couldn't change their working practices because we were too small. So we basically told them, look at us as free R&D. And by the way, if you are the one person not to work with us, then you're gonna look stupid because your competitors are gonna look clever because we're gonna be giving them loads of insights about this new thing called the internet. Then the other thing about scaling, which is really what I've been asked to talk about, is, because as you heard, lastminute.com did get to $2 billion of revenues within the first 7 years. $2 billion gross transaction value. So that's the sales value through the platform. And one of the ways we did that is we invested a lot in technology, which at the time people thought was slightly insane. We invested about £25 million a year in technology. Today, that would probably only cost you a couple of million. But it meant we would lose a lot of money at the early years. So we had to get people to believe in this big vision. And I feel we had to spend that money because otherwise the American companies who had this much bigger single market would have taken us on with a much better platform. So there was that in that massive investment in technology that was important. But then to justify it, we had to go and sell across multiple categories. So we had to do going away, going out, staying in, theater, restaurants, spa bookings, everything. And we had to go across the whole of, basically the whole of Europe. And then some of that was, so the key to this is, yes, money was part of it. So we went to do an IPO after 18 months. No one in Europe, I don't think, has ever done an IPO that quickly. And by the way, longer story, but I'm not necessarily recommending you all try an IPO within 18 months. It's kind of painful being CEO of a public company when you have very little revenues and very hard to forecast. But it was good for us. We went public the day the market peaked. We raised £120 million. We then went on to raise a convertible of £70 million. So in total, the company raised over £220 million. Cash can be a moat, a barrier. Uber's obviously doing that at a level that all of us can only dream of in terms of that cash barrier. But the geographic expansion was key. It was key to the eventual sale. It was also key to enable us to justify spending across such a large amount of money on technology. So we did different models of expansion. So in France, we bought 2 companies. We actually bought Degree Tour, which at the time, believe it or not, was the largest e-commerce company in Europe. That was because it was a Minitel company in the days when Minitel, for those that you don't remember, sort of like a French telex system. So we bought that one and some others. So that's the way we had to get into France. There were too many barriers, and there still are too many. We all need to push for the single digital market and to make it really mean what it says on the tin. So France, we bought 2. Germany, we ended up having to buy. The Germans obviously love copying things. I'm sorry, not just copying things. Any Germans out there? But there was a business called lastminute.de that we basically had to buy. And so but we also, I think one of the things when I talk to startups is about being creative about business development. So if there's one other lesson about scaling, I'd argue it's the ambition of being international, and it's finding out what the barriers are and roadblocks, which we can go back to, but it's also finding innovative solutions. We launched in Japan in a joint venture with 4 of the top companies there. We launched in Spain because we thought it would have been too much. How could we justify marketing in Spain as well? So we did a joint venture with the largest hotel group one of the largest hotels groups in Spain called Sol Meliá, and we had a put and a call option so we could buy them out, which we eventually did, and that worked well. So there were all these different models. The other interesting models I like of how we expanded were, one of them was how do we get those early suppliers on? And we did something called performance-based warrants, which a lot of entrepreneurs hate the sound of. What do I mean by performance-based warrants? It means when we went to British Airways and Lufthansa, we said to them, right, we want you to outperform your market share on our platform. And to give you an incentive to do that, if you exceed your natural market share on our platform, we will give you a share of the company. So what does that mean? It means that we were happy to give those away if they triggered it, and actually it meant that even if they didn't trigger the warrants, which in this case they actually didn't, it meant they tried harder than they would have done otherwise. So I think it was quite a good mechanic to get them to take us more seriously than they would have otherwise done. The other question often with entrepreneurs, and often you're told by your boards and traditional business people, focus. And I'm actually going to be one of those crazy people who say, maybe you don't have to focus at everything. Find out what your bottlenecks are and why you can't do 10 things in parallel. And for us, that bottleneck was, for example, it was a shopping basket that I suddenly found out why everyone said they couldn't do all these projects I wanted at once. And the shopping basket was too complicated. So we decided we would actually do something unusual. We'd spend 10 months and £1 million and rewrite the shopping basket so that I could do my 10 crazy ideas at once. And then the other trigger was when we got into lots of other different categories, we did acquisitions. So like restaurant food delivery, well before there was Just Eat, a £2 billion company in 2002, we were doing restaurant food delivery. So I've got just a few more, not long now, so I'll just quickly go on to some other things I'm doing, because I think in terms of helping companies scale, the other thing I'd love to point you towards is a new company I've started and I'm chairman of. It's called SmartUp. Like startup, but SmartUp. It's available only on the App Store, iOS for now, but it will be Android soon. And it is a platform to help you learn entrepreneurial tricks of the trade from seasoned entrepreneurs. So we've got lots of brilliant entrepreneurs giving their advice, and it's gamified learning. It was one of the best new apps in the App Store last week in the US and the UK. So we think we're just starting, it's still the beginning, but we think that can be an amazing platform to help entrepreneurs. And then the other business, I'm running out of time, but the other business I help start and chair is called Made.com, where we're taking some of those lessons. It is more focused. It's furniture direct from factory to consumer. It's raised over $80 million, and we think it's going to be the European market leader, and it already is, in furniture. And some of the lessons we're learning there are actually fewer, smarter people. So for example, we're selling very well in France with not a single French employee contract. We're doing that all from London. They've given me some more time, I think. Oh no, I'm over. Sorry. With that, I'd better finish up. But there's one other thing I should say, because Actually, the British government have asked me to be here and talk. And so one of the other things I'd just like to do is a quick pitch for another amazing, Helsinki's an amazing ecosystem. I've been thrilled with the companies I've met today and the energy and the dynamism, and I really congratulate Slush on that. But I think London is also an amazing ecosystem and another fantastic gateway to Europe. So we'd welcome any of you there, and if any of you got questions on how great London is to start your company, then find me on LinkedIn. Thank you.